Hey guys, welcome back. So for today's tutorial, I am going to talk to you about compositing two images together to make one image to kind of give your foreground image more of depth or to tell more of a story or even to add a sky layer overlay into an image. This works really well as well with that. Even if you don't have that length or the depth in your image, you can always do this with two images by compositing it together. I'm going to go over that with you today. The program I'm going to be using is going to be Photoshop CC version 19 if anybody's curious on which Photoshop and which version I'm using today. The two images I'm going to be using, it's going to be two images of my own stock. I like to go out and take different pictures of if I see the skies rolling in, some really nice puffy clouds. I like to take pictures of those. Also like to take pictures of different flowers or insects because I never know when I'm going to be using those later for either making my own digital backdrops or if I'm going to use them for a client's composited piece. So I like to have a little variety of my own works to give it that personal touch of my own. Today's images I'm using though is going to be this picture of this dandelion here I took a shot of, and a picture of this sky that I had taken a shot of 2 years ago. It was, around my birthday. I went out shooting because I saw the sky was really rolling in with these gorgeous looking thunderstorm clouds. So to start off, you're going to open a new file. You go up here to File, go down to New, because you want to start off with a blank canvas to composite these two images together. You can always composite them onto one by just resizing the other one and unlocking it, but I like to start off with a new canvas. The file size I'm going to start with is going to be a 12 by 12. It's going to be 300 pixels, RGB color, 8-bit, and I like to have a transparent background. You can go with black, white, or a colored background, but I prefer to use transparent. It just works better for me. I'm going to click down on Create. Then you're going to take your foreground image, make sure you're on your Move tool, and drag it up to your new file. And this file is going to have to be resized because it's much larger because it's a raw image. Click OK. I'm going to do the same thing with the sky. I'm just going to click it and drag it into my new image. Resize that down. Now right here I do need to drop my opacity because I need to see my resizing for this image. Click OK and then check my opacity because I need to make sure that my line of sight back here is a little bit in the distance more because I've got these tall pieces of grass right in here. I'm going to zoom in some. I've got these tall pieces of grass that I need to be careful for when I'm blending this image back in here. That actually looks pretty decent as far as back here in my distance. I'm going to bring up my opacity. Okay. Now, just like with any type of sky that you're going to blend into any type of image, if you're going to blend it in with a portrait, a different landscape, a flower, for instance, image, you'll need to have that sky out of focus. It needs to give it that depth and that depth of field and that distance because when you've shot that flower up close, the sky and everything else is not going to be in focus. The sky is typically never in focus when you're focusing down on something down on the ground or a little bit closer to you and your camera anyways. How I'm going to blur this is I'm going to make sure I've clicked on to my sky layer. I'm going to go up to filter. I'm not going to use Gaussian blur. I'm actually going to go down to my blur gallery and choose tilt shift. The tilt shift blur, I like to use it because it has a feathering to it that I can use and manipulate and move it however I want to. So with the tilt shift blur, this middle section right in here by this pen, and this middle section will always be in focus. I'm going to boost this just to kind of show you. I'm going to raise this blur up because we're just affecting this sky image right here. It'll always be in focus. These two solid lines are where the feathering will stop. So this is where your feathering is going to start, where the two dotted lines are, and that's where your feathering will stop. So if you bring it in, it's going to bring that feathering in. The same thing as with you bring your feathering in, it's going to bring it a tighter feather. Okay, so with this image though, I'm actually going to bring my pen all the way to the top. The reason why is I want this top portion up here to not be as in focus because it will be a little bit closer to you and to your subject than it would be if you had it completely in focus, and that's why I'm using the tilt blur versus just the regular Gaussian blur. On the tilt blur as well, I also always like to make sure I click high quality because I want it to be the best quality of a blur. I'm going to drop this blur down too because that's extremely unrealistic. I'm going to move my pen up. Then I'm also going to move this feathering up. Now I'll click it off and on just to kind of show you it didn't blur all of this like this is blurred down here, but it did just kind of blend it a little bit in there. I think that blur looks really good, so I'm just going to click OK. You can always change how much blur you want in there. Also, you can change the symmetric distortion on it as well, but I'm going to leave it as it is. Okay, now that we've gotten that completely blurred, now our next step is going to be to blend the background image into our foreground, which is our flower here. We're going to do that by adding a layer mask. We'll need to make sure that we're clicked on our background, add our layer mask down here on the bottom right hand corner. Make sure we have clicked on the white layer mask. Make sure our black is selected for our foreground color and pick a brush. The brush we're going to use, this looks like a good decent size. I've got it at 500. I am going to up the opacity up on it. I'm going to start off with about 80%. I'm just going to kind of blend away. And this is a really nice soft brush, so it's just going to kind of give it those soft edges. I'm going to remove a lot of the yellow out of this one. I'm going to drop the opacity back down on it. Then I'm going to turn on my white brush and just kind of touch here in the edges some. And you can always zoom in. You want to take your time on this. I'm just kind of brushing through it really quickly just to show you the effect of how you can blend your background in with your foreground. Okay, I like the way that turned out. Now I'm going to crop this image down some just so I can see how it looks. I really like the way that turned out. You turn it off and turn it back on. You can always go in here and just brush a little bit more if needed. It's all about preference. It's all about the kind of image that you're working on at the time. This next step I'm going to do is I'm actually going to blur a little bit of the foreground image. I like to add a little bit of blur right in here to really pull your eye in to my main subject, which is going to be the dandelion right here. I need to make sure I'm clicked onto my dandelion image. I'm going to do the same type of blur. I'm going to go down to my filters and go down to blur gallery, tilt shift. But this time I want to pull my pen all the way down onto my dandelion. I'm going to take this blur and move it all the way up because I don't want it to affect anything on the top. It's already out of focus enough, and I don't want it to affect any of these blades of grass back in here as well. I do like how it already blurred right in here, and I'll show you the before and after here in just a moment if you'll just kind of focus right down in here. I'm going to click on high quality, and then that's the after and that's the before. I really like the way it already kind of gave it that blur. It's at 15 pixels, and I think that's a good start and end point on that one. I'm going to click OK. Okay, now if there's any other adjustments that you want to do to the image, you can do that now. You can just flatten this image by just clicking on the very bottom layer, right click and go up to flatten image, and do any other adjustments that you're wanting or add anything to it as well. This is just kind of a quick tutorial to show you guys how to composite two images together to get that depth or tell more of a story or more of a distance into the image, or if you needed to add a sky overlay or some sky to your image, this is how you can do that as well. Thank you guys so much for watching this tutorial. If you have any questions or comments, I'd love to see what you guys have to say about the tutorials. Just throw them down inside the comments down below. Also, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Share this video, subscribe to my channel, follow me on Facebook, Instagram. I'd love to hear from you guys there, see what you guys are doing, see how you guys are progressing. Until next time.